I was reading the Gospel of John in chapter 14, and there's this moment where Jesus has gathered with his friends, and it's basically the last night that they'll all be together. Because after this moment, he's going to go into the city of Jerusalem. He's going to be betrayed. He's going to be taken in on trial. He's going to be condemned and convicted, and he's going to be sentenced to death. And then he's going to be taken and crucified, and he's going to die. And his disciples are going to freak out, and they're going to run away, and they're going to leave him and run in fear for their lives. But before all that happens, Jesus gathers with them, and they're going to share a last meal together. And he tries to prep them a little bit for this moment. He tries to remind them that there is going to be some hard times. There's going to be some questioning. There's going to be some doubt that's going to come up. That there's going to be some moments of fear. That they are going to fail, and that ultimately it's going to be okay. That he's not going to forget them or hold it against them. And he's trying to prep them for this moment. And so he tells them in the Gospel of John in chapter 14, verse 15, he tells them, he says, "If you love me, you'll obey my commands." And I think that sometimes it's important for us to ask what we hear when we hear those words, "if you love me." Because I think that a lot of us carry baggage, and a lot of us carry past experiences where we don't hear it the way I think Jesus intends it to be heard. And I think even his disciples didn't hear it the way he intended it to be heard, partially because they didn't understand what was happening. And that's where I think sometimes we are. We don't always understand what Jesus is actually saying to us when he says, "If you love me, you'll obey my commands and you'll do what I say." We hear the things from our past and from our history, which is sometimes we can hear almost a dare. You know, I want you to prove how much you love me. I want you to show me how much you love me. And if you're not showing me enough, if you're not proving it hard enough, then I don't think you really do love me. How many of us have heard that? I mean, we've been there before. I know I've been there before, where prove it, tell me, show me. Let's see it, big boy. Put your action where your words are. Walk the talk. And we can sometimes get into this sort of dare kind of moment. And others of us, maybe we felt like it's more of a nagging, right? You know, like, why aren't you doing what I say? Why aren't you showing me how much you love me? What's wrong with you? Why haven't you gone and done this yet? Why haven't you followed that command? Why haven't you demonstrated this particular action? And so sometimes that kind of a statement comes across very nagging and a little bit whiny and complaining in our past, and in our head we hear that voice. Sometimes it's the voice of disappointment. I know this one definitely I've heard before. When someone looks at me, and it's almost like they shake their head, and it's the tisk tisk tisk. You know, why? You know, if you really loved me, if you had really loved me, but you didn't. And so you failed me. You've let me down, and I'm disappointed in you, and I'm discouraged. And I'm sad. And sometimes that leads us into that sense of we almost hear an accusation of failure of, you couldn't have succeeded. You weren't good enough to succeed. You didn't really love me. And I think that it's really important that when we read Jesus' words here, and when we put ourselves in that place and we hear his voice speaking that to us, that we don't hear the voice of someone who's daring us, and almost sort of challenging us. And we don't hear a voice that's nagging us and trying to just sort of guilt trip us into action. We don't hear a disappointed, let down, accusing voice that's just trying to condemn us for our failure and make us feel ashamed. And I think that the reason for that, and this is again one of those areas where Jesus' disciples didn't understand it in that moment, and sometimes we don't understand it in those moments. But I think one of the things that's important to remember is that Jesus is trying to remind them that it's not sort of, the emphasis isn't on the word "if you love me." The emphasis comes later, because he says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And if you'll do that, then I'm going to send you help. Because you're not going to be alone. You are not doing this alone. You are not by yourself. This is not all on you. This is not all up to you. And this is not going to be accomplished just by what you can do. That's important for us to hear. Because when I hear, if you love me, I want to hear the invitation of Jesus first to love him. And that's really what Jesus is saying here. Is he's saying, first and foremost, you are invited to love me and be loved by me. And if you'll do that, then I can help you do all the rest. This is how he continues. He says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, and I'll ask the Father. I'll ask him, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth. And the world won't even understand it because it doesn't see him and it doesn't know him. But you do, because he dwells with you and he'll be inside of you. I'm not going to leave you like children. I'm going to come and be with you. In that day, you're going to know that I'm in the Father and that you're in me and I'm in you, because whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he loves me. And he who loves me is loved by my Father, and I'm going to love him and I'm going to show myself to him. This is important for us to understand, that Jesus' words were not condemning. Jesus' words were not a challenge. Jesus' words were not meant to be sit there and beaten over the head with. They're not meant to make us feel like we're broken, miserable human beings. They are an invitation to experience a new way to live with him and for him. It's an invitation to know the way of Jesus. And it's an invitation to experience the power of his Spirit that sustains us and transforms us and changes us. And so I would encourage you, as you hear and as you think about this particular passage, what do you hear? Do you hear someone who's being negative? Do you hear criticism? Do you hear accusation? Do you hear disappointment? Do you hear a dare and a challenge? Or do you hear an invitation to experience the gospel in your life? Do you hear an invitation to experience the power of God in your life? And do you hear an invitation to step into the ways of Jesus, which can change our lives?